click the button. Going live. Okay, and we're live. So thank you for coming, Harlan. We always, and thank you everybody for coming in. This is our second event on interview tips and tricks that we've been sharing with our learners, trying to bring about a bit more knowledge on interviews, how to prep for them, what technical interviews are about, and everything that you should know if you're about to apply or if you're trying to get into tech. With us today have Harlan Ginsberg, and please go ahead and introduce yourself and tell me a little bit of what you do at Codecademy.
Hi, yeah, and welcome everybody. Super excited to be chatting today. So my name is Harlan. I'm part of the talent team here, and so I focus on essentially hiring folks to join our product organization, our data org, and the engineering org as well. So I've been here for 6 months. Fede, did we start the same day actually?
Maybe. I started the second week of March, I want to say, like the 8th, something like that.
I think I did as well. Yeah, so I think we started the same day. So it's been about 6 months.
We're cohort buddies.
Yeah, exactly. Cohort buddies. And yeah, before this, I was at a very early stage health tech startup where I led the entire recruiting function. And prior to that, I was in the ad tech space, also overseeing product data and hiring there. So been doing this for some time already, but loving Codecademy, of course.
Wow. Okay. You know, not a lot of people grow up thinking I want to be a technical recruiter when you know, it's my day to day. Was there anything specific that drove you into this role?
Yes. So when I was in college, just got like a general business degree, didn't really know what I wanted to do with it, didn't know what options were there for me. And I was at a career fair, I met some folks that were in recruiting, but on the agency side of things, sounded pretty cool. So I did that for a while. And I actually, after like 9 or 10 months, got such a bad taste in my mouth. Just from the process, the experience, I wanted to get completely out of recruiting in general. At the time, I was interviewing for other jobs, and so was my wife. And we were both going through some awful processes, and we didn't have great experiences. And I was talking to one company, and they said, you know, we'd love for you to join us and be a recruiter. And I said, you know what? If I can do this and make the process just a little bit better and actually make sure that people are having like a good time, or at least, you know, don't walk away from the interview thinking, wow, I hate those people. Then, you know, this could be an interesting avenue to take it down. And I just love the intricacies of it. I love meeting new people every single day. And so, yeah, I'm very happy now.
So I'm sorry if I missed it before, but for how long would you say that you've been doing recruiting just in general?
4 years more professionally. In college, I was doing some like work here and there, but it was obviously I was still a student. So,
okay, 4 years. So I'm assuming that in 4 years, you've seen a lot of candidates, like a fair amount. It's fair to say you've seen the entire spectrum from really good candidates, strong applications, to the poor ones, the ones that could have done better. And I'm assuming that from your perspective, seeing them come and go, you probably have your own thoughts where you see candidates where you say, you know what, if he had or she had prepared this a little better, or if she had known a bit more of that, or if they could have demonstrated this a bit better, they would have been fine. Like because from their perspective, it might have been a very stressful process. Like I'm applying, really stressed out. From your perspective, you have sort of like the ability to look at it in hindsight and compare them with all the applicants you've seen for the same role or for a similar role. So I'm curious to know, when you have these candidates, like, is there like a baseline? Like if we are talking about our learners at Codecademy and they're thinking of applying for the first technical job, it's like, okay, I've learned with Codecademy, I've gone around, I think I'm ready, I built a portfolio. Yeah. What is this sort of baseline that you would tell people? Say, look, these are kind of like the check boxes that you should make sure that you're checking every time.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So from like a very base level perspective, if you're going for, let's say, your first job actually as a developer or data and whatever it might be, I think it's really important to remember to talk about projects or things that you have worked on where you've actually been able to utilize those tools or showcase your skills. Because at the end of the day, you can list a bunch of different tools, technologies, languages on your resume. But if I don't have a definitive answer of whether or not you can actually back up that work, whether it's through like your GitHub or some other way you can showcase your coding or the work that you've done through portfolio or whatever it is, I don't actually know, right? So like that's what, they always say, like it's hard to get experience when Nova won't give you that first chance. It's hard to take that first chance on someone if you don't actually know what they can or cannot do, right? So
Mhm.
it's more than like, obviously you should be putting a lot of work into your resume. If there are areas on your resume where you can actually say like, I've utilized this tool or this language to work on X, Y, or Z, here was the outcome, right? Like here's what happened because of that. I think that'll sort of set you aside from the base level perspective, because again, anyone can just kind of write whatever they want on their resume, but it's
Mhm.
our job, especially as that first person that you'd be talking to say, do they actually know their stuff? And should we
Okay.
pursue this person?
Showcasing your work. Yeah, I've heard that before. That it's really
Yeah.
important to showcase what you can do. Like that's why, portfolio projects and things like that. What about a bit things that are a little less technical? A lot of people, I think, when they're applying for technical roles, they feel really confident about the tech skills, like
Yeah.
programming languages and frameworks, but they might be a bit more shaky or concerned about how do I demonstrate, the typical keywords like how
Yeah.
do you demonstrate that you work well with a team? Like, how do you write that in a resume? How do you explain that? Or how, oh, I deal well with conflict, or I'm a solutions focused person, or whatever. Like, is there in your experience, have you seen like, what are the best ways to showcase that? Like saying, go about showcasing your soft skills, because those are important too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And every company that I've worked at, if you are the most talented engineer they've ever met, but you're not someone that's going to really add to the culture, I don't like this culture fit. I think culture add is what we're looking for, right? Someone that's going to really be a part of what we're doing here and be passionate about it. And it's hard to write that on a resume, right? Like, as far as I'm concerned, saying things like, I was able to collaborate with X, Y, or Z people, departments to achieve whatever goal it is, or to build whatever product or ship something. I think that's a great way to start on your resume, right? Because, you know, you can't say, I worked with Melissa and we worked really well together, like on your resume. Like, you can tell
Mm-hmm.
me that in the phone call, but you have to be conscientious of, it's a resume and we're going through so many of them. So saying things like who you collaborate, or not who you collaborated with specifically, but like the departments, the other engineers, um, from the perspective of like conflict resolution, you can say things like, hey, worked on this particular product or worked on shipping this, something went wrong, I worked with X, Y, or Z folks, we fixed it, we put it out there, and that led to whatever it is, right? So it's hard on a resume because you only have so much space. But some of those buzzwords, like, I try to stay away from buzzwords, because if you say too many buzzwords, it feels like you can actually do anything. But things like, collaboration, things like actually working through a conflict, solution driven, like those are all important things. And then if it's enough to catch our eye, we'll say, okay, like let's have a conversation with this person, and then we can dig in deeper.
I'm curious, now that you're talking about resumes, I'm actually curious. Do you have like a mental map of what the perfect resume is? Like, okay, if you ask me what a resume is, I will tell you there's a name at the top, and then there's relevant
Yeah.
experience. There's a big block of relevant experience. There's a big block of education, usually, unless you have a lot of experience, then education is kind of like minor note. You might
Yeah.
have like a hobbies, like interests, general interests. And then
Yeah.
usually there's like another section that is something like skills. And then people list things like teamwork and
Yeah.
Word and Excel and like, things like that, my Windows and Linux or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
if you had to give me the wireframe of what a resume looks like, especially for somebody that's applying for the first time job, or they might not have relevant experience, and they're thinking, well, is it fair to add projects in my resume? Is it fair to mention this? How do I mention this? Should it be a new category, another category? Like, what is the like a good wireframe for somebody that might not have a lot of professional experience and they're trying to get the first job?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think it's especially important to remember that your resume, when you're going after your first job, is going to be very, very different than your resume 5-10 years down the line, whatever it is, right? So definitely name some contact info, right? Whether it's email or number, right? Like, we got to know how to contact you. I've seen people put their like exact address, and I don't think that that's very like necessary. You can put like the city or the town or the state or whatever, but I've seen people put like the exact apartment number. I don't need to see that. Unless you want to share it, of course, that's fine. But then of course, like, education is really important if you're just starting out, right? Projects are crucial, because I was just talking about, like, it's important to showcase what you've actually worked on. That project section is great. I also think it's helpful to hyperlink. Usually people do it at the top. Your LinkedIn, GitHub, if you have, I think that's great. Because your LinkedIn, right? Like, you can write so much more than you can on your resume. You can showcase more things. You can hyperlink different things there. And your GitHub, obviously, it has work on it. So I think that's really important. And then, like, any sort of relevant work experience, if you have it, I think that's great. If not, it's totally fine. A lot of technical resumes will list the actual languages, tools, things that they use, either at the top or the bottom. I think most people do the bottom. I think the bottom is probably best, because when I first look at a resume, I'm more interested in the substance of it. I'm not as interested at first, right, in the tools. If you're writing about all your experiences and you're saying what tools that you're using in those experiences, I think that's great. I think a lot of people are hesitant to just put those keywords in the actual sentences and say, this person's not actually going to read this. They might just control find and try to find these words at the bottom. So I think that's fair. I don't do that, but right, like, everyone does this differently. So
I think sometimes they do that because the servers, like, there's some automated, some companies will do automated like resume stuff, right? So you're trying to hit keywords so that you don't get denied by the system, I guess, rejected by the system.
If you are going to do that, I think it's totally fine to put at the bottom. Maybe this is just a pet peeve of mine, but if you're inserting those tools and languages in the actual substance of your resume, you don't need to bold them. I don't think it looks great from a aesthetics perspective. I've seen a lot of bolding, especially lately. But yeah, I like to see hobbies. I like to see, like, whatever you want to put on there, because at the end of the day, we were talking about some of those soft skills. If you're going for that first engineering job and your resume is super tech heavy, and then you put in there like, oh, I love to ski, or I love to play sports, like, that gives us an insight into, okay, this person's not just sitting at their computer all day, right? Like, they're doing stuff. They might be interested in whatever club we have here at Codecademy, right? Like, we have a soccer team. They might be interested in that. So, like, I don't know if it's like a perfect wireframe, but I think in general, adding those things and putting your own personal touch on it is, I think, great.
Is it a myth that you only look at resumes like 6 seconds?
No. I mean, 6 seconds is a lot. I try to give more time, right? But it is hard when, especially for like an entry-level job, hundreds, sometimes thousands of resumes, and you want to get through them all. And so 6 seconds, probably not. Most definitely less than a minute.
Okay. Yeah, because I know that there's a myth. It's like, 6 seconds, 10 seconds, like, basically they're going to look top down. And if nothing catches your eye within the first few like seconds of scanning text, it's kind of like out. Is there a way, knowing that that's the process, knowing that someone on the other side, that they don't have any pet peeve against you, it's just like, they're just going through a lot. They're just going through volume. is there anything you can do on a resume to make sure that the person stops, even if it's for an extra 2 seconds? Somebody you're just going through and go like, oh wait, like that extra, attention, or that extra intentionality that makes someone want to schedule a call with you. Is there anything in particular that tends to work better than other methods? Like you said, bolding letters doesn't work. Okay, so what works?
So if I see those hyperlinks at the top, LinkedIn, GitHub, whatever portfolio you might have, I'm automatically more interested because I know that I can find more information there, right? If I have to go searching, I'm probably less likely, right? Like you need to sort of spoon feed that kind of stuff to us a little bit. If it looks clean, right? Like use your judgment. If pretend that you're on the other side of it, right? And you're like, okay, I have 100 of these to look through in the next 30 to 45 minutes of my day. And my resume is kind of scatterbrained and all over the place. Like, are they going to look at mine over someone's who's like very clean, crisp? Like, I'm not saying it needs to be perfect. It doesn't need to be like you're going out for a job at a bank or anything, but like make it look nice.
Okay. And what about the myth of some people worry that when they're contributing to the repos on GitHub, it keeps track with those green dots of like your activity over the past month or something? Yeah. Is that something like, obviously every company is going to be different and every company is going to go through the process differently, but in your experience, is that really, some people obsess over this? Like, I need to make contributions every day so that it's a very active. Is that a thing?
Honestly, for companies I've worked at, it has not been, but I can see that being a thing. I can see that making sense, especially for like first job. I can see that because let's say you've been an engineer for 3 or 4 years, you have plenty of work to back up that you know those particular skills. But if you're going for that first job and your GitHub repo is like the only place where you have code, then I can see places being like, okay, they're contributing quite often. Like they must want this, or they must be really, really excited. Again, like maybe if you haven't contributed in like 6 months, I'd like be curious, but I don't think that would stop me from reaching out to someone, if I'm honest.
Okay.
But I think everyone is different.
And you mentioned the hyperlinks to GitHub and LinkedIn. So you're saying that if a recruiter is interested in you, they might be interested in looking at more information like in the background stuff. So it's not just about sprucing up your resume. You need to make sure that places like LinkedIn, like, so these places work, because some people think like, LinkedIn, they don't actually look at it. That doesn't actually matter. Are you saying that in your experience, it does matter more often than not, that you should put some time into making a good introduction in your LinkedIn, put a good photo there, could put some text, add on your experiences?
Yes, it 100%. It is still the top tool that recruiters use to find talent. I think it has its flaws, right? Every product has its flaws, but it is a really great source of information, and it can set you apart from others. Another thing that's great about LinkedIn is you can have people endorse you for certain skills, and you can have people sort of write references for you. And what a better thing, like there's nothing better for me to see. I'm looking at someone for whatever role it is. I can see that people have backed them up for whatever tool, whatever language, and that they have former colleagues or maybe former classmates in this case saying like, wow, it was so great to work with them in our boot camp. And we were able to work on a project together and they did a great job and they were great to work with. I then have from it's not your resume, but from your LinkedIn, before we even chat, I know that you're a good collaborator. I know that you can work with people well. And so, make sure it's genuine, right? There are people out there that are like, oh, I'll endorse you for leadership if you endorse me for whatever. Like that's fake. That's not real. But there must be people that you've worked with or that maybe went to class with, that you can endorse each other for certain things that are real. And I think that benefits everybody.
Okay. Yeah, that's totally fair. I mean, just curious because I know that sometimes people are like, yeah, does it really matter? Does it not? We don't know. So I just wanted to hear your take on it.
Yeah.
What about templating for resumes? Like you go to Google Drive and you click new document and you can actually template it for a resume and they look really clean, really well organized already. You can just replace the Lorem Ipsum with your stuff.
Yeah.
Is there, I'm not going to ask for the benefit, but is there a drawback of using a template, or is that you just don't mind? Like, do you look at a template go like, oh, they didn't put the time into writing their own resume? Or do you just say, the information is here, it is what it is?
The latter for me. I mean, it's hard to come up with, exactly how you want it to look. And I think Google has some decent templates. I think Word has some decent templates. Use them, but if you're adding the right information in there, like even if you are using a template, you're still putting a lot of work in there because you're putting so much substance on that resume. So I don't really care about a template. I know, like, for example, my wife, she's a creative. She would never use a template, right? Like it's up to you. As long as it showcases what you can do, it's clean looking, and it doesn't look lazy or sloppy, then I think a template is totally fine. They make them for a reason,
Have you seen any templates or any resumes where maybe they try to cram so much information that they do the font really small, or they start eating spaces? They don't allow enough space between paragraphs and between titles. I'm assuming that when you keep talking about making it clean, you keep talking about making it crisp, making it clean looking. So I'm assuming that those are things to avoid. Is there like do you have like a quick top three? It was like this, and this look really bad in a resume, avoid at all costs, even if it means writing less words.
Yes. So bolded letters, 100%. I think, it's hard of like, there's some where at the beginning of a resume, there's a huge, it's almost like a table chart of like, it takes up more than half the page or half the page, and it just lists all the technologies before I can actually read about you and what you've done. If you're going to do that, put it at the bottom, try to make it smaller. I mean, I'm not here to look at like a table chart of what tools you say because that doesn't give me any substance. And then like, if it goes more than one page, I'm not crazy about it. Like, I think that's fine. But just make sure it's not fluff, or it's not like supremely like double, triple spaced or anything like that. Like have it make sense. Just make it make sense. Like use your best judgment, but avoid the bolded letters and that big box at the top of just a bunch of tools and languages, because that doesn't give me anything.
Okay, so no bolded letters, put the technologies at the bottom. What about something else, some other cardinal sin you've seen of resumes? Is like, avoid that one too. Like maybe fonts. I would imagine that you start using very stylistic fonts that make it harder to read. You say you only have like a minute to read a resume. Like if you can read it, you're more likely to pass on.
That's fair. I have actually very seldomly come across resumes where the font is so crappy that I can't read it. But I would say like that's a very good thing to keep in mind. Like,
okay.
And it doesn't need to be crazy colors of font either. Like black and white is fine,
What about resumes that extend beyond one page? Is that a big no-no?
I think it depends on if you are putting stuff just to put it. Like if the font is huge and you've triple spaced things or you've double spaced things, like you can bring it down to a page, because again, we're going through them in less than a minute essentially. And especially if it's your first job out of school or out of a boot camp, like I don't expect much on there to be able to say this merits more than one page. But if I see one that like it's a good looking resume, there's substance on it, and it's longer than one page, I'm not gonna be like, oh, it's longer than one page, toss it out. Like just again, make it make sense.
Okay. Another question about resumes. How does a resume change if you are going for, let's say, does it change a lot considering that's your first job? So if it's your first job, you don't have a lot of experience behind you. does it change a lot the fact that you might be applying for a technical role in maybe the web development part of a company, or in the data analyst part of a company, or in the design part of a company? Does the field that you're applying for change the resume a lot, or it just changes the contents of it, and mostly it's just all the same?
Yeah.
Highlighting your teamwork, highlighting your, projects.
Yeah. I think for that first job, it should relatively stay the same except for the content, right? So like if you've worked on projects that are data analytics heavy, but also some web dev heavy, but you're going for an analytics role, put that solid information, that relevant information to the top and highlight that. You don't have to get rid of the other stuff, because I think that's also important. But if I'm reading a resume for a data analytics role or an analyst role, and the first thing I see is web dev stuff, then I'm going to say like, okay, they might have the foundational knowledge for this role, but is this actually the role that they want, or do they want a web dev focused role, right? So you don't have to take it off, just prioritize it, right? Like top to bottom, it doesn't matter.
All right, makes total sense. You got to know what you want to know. I would imagine that copy and pasting resumes and stuff, like, do you think that people have to tailor the resumes to the company they're applying? Because I would imagine the cover letters, but the resumes, do you actually have to tailor it much company to company if you're going to be applying for 100 companies, or resumes relatively stay the same? Is it fair for a candidate to say, look, I need to save time because I'm applying for 400 jobs in the next week? I'm going through like 8 hours a day of applications.
Yeah, absolutely it is. Because as far as I'm concerned, applying for jobs is a full-time job. It's a lot of work. Assuming that most of the jobs that you're applying to are of a similar title and a similar level, you're really not going to need to change it, if at all, right? It's only if you're applying to a web dev job and an analytics role, right? Like that's the difference here. Obviously the cover letter needs to change a lot, or a decent amount. But the resume itself, like if you're just going for a bunch of front end roles, like should be similar, or probably doesn't need much change at all.
Okay, fair enough. Do you have any general advice that you would like to share? Because I think I asked all the questions I could come up with.
As far as resumes are concerned?
Yeah, hello, resumes or applying for jobs in general. I don't know, do you have any tips? Like if I were applying for my first job and I came and said, Harlan, I'm applying for jobs, give me something that will give me hope. Like, what is it? What should I be?
Hope is important. I think number one is just keep hope alive, because like it's going to be very challenging to apply to jobs, and you're not going to hear back from a lot of people. And when you do hear back, a lot of the times it's going to be no. And that's not a reflection of you. It's a reflection of what the company needs, where they are, and does your background, does your experience mesh with that? Do you know what I mean? Even now, like I have a lot of friends that come to me constantly and they're like, I don't even know why I'm applying to jobs. I mean, no one's seeing it. It's like, it's going to happen. You just need to keep chugging along, and you need to keep doing it and try not to get discouraged. If there are roles that you are particularly interested in, because you should be applying to a lot of roles, right? Like anything that sounds interesting to you, you should apply to it, because you never actually know what the role is going to be like until you talk to someone there, right? Like there's only so much we can put in a job description. But let's say there's something that you're super excited about, apply, and then look up that company on LinkedIn and see who's a part of their talent team. And I very rarely get messages like this, but if you apply to a data analyst role and you look up Codecademy and you see who is on the talent team here, you might not know that I'm the person responsible, but you can reach out to a member of the talent team and say, hey, I just applied to this role. I'm super interested. Are you the person that I can like talk to about this? Should I maybe be talking to someone else about this? And listen, everyone is busy. I'm not going to say that we're going to respond to you right away, but for me, that at least shows initiative, right? And if it's 150 applicants for one sort of entry level web dev job, and I get a couple of people that show that initiative, like that's enough for me to say this person has differentiated themselves enough to the point where I know they're super interested about this job, right? And you don't have to do that for every job, but if there's ones that you're particularly interested in, like you might as well give it a go. Worst case scenario, you never hear back, but at least shoot your shot, right? Like try it out. It doesn't hurt. Talent professionals, we're on LinkedIn constantly. And again, we might not be able to respond right away because there's a lot going on. We'll see it at some point, and they should respond.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I like it. I mean, differentiating, yeah, that's really tough. I mean, I can speak from personal experience that when I wanted to work at Codecademy, I was contributing in the community for almost a year before I noticed, like, just I was browsing the careers page of Codecademy. I was like, yeah, it would be cool to work here. And then I realized, like, oh, wow, this role is open. And I applied. And I was like, but like, it's just one of those happy accidents. But you look back and you realize you were walking that path. You were building the foundations for you to be a successful candidate way before you submit the application. Everything I did in the past, every relationship I built, people I reach out to, right? So it's kind of like one of those things you said, like, hey, find the talent team, reach out to them. It's sort of like you're trying to make your own luck. You're preparing yourself so that if they do say, okay, well, I'll give you a call, you're ready. You're ready for it. Like, you don't want to get caught with you empty-handed, I suppose, if you get called back. Okay, let's see if there's any questions in the chat. I'm looking right now. Let's see, a couple questions from one of the users. One of them is, how long did it take for you to feel comfortable applying while feeling confident about passing the technical? Okay, you get that question?
Say it one more time for me.
So how long did it take you? Okay, so I think they meant to ask how long it will take a candidate to build up the confidence to apply for jobs and being confident that they're going to be able to pass the technical. So I know that this comes back to the impostor syndrome of, like, it's my first job, maybe out of school, out of a boot camp, out of your self-taught. Maybe, well, if you're self-taught, like, it's times 10, the pressure of saying, 100%. I'm not legit. I learned this online, whatever. Like, so have you come across any applicants that felt that kind of impostor syndrome, like they were having trouble showcasing? Like, you could see in the resume or like in the paperwork, you could see that they know, but they are having trouble showcasing it. Do you think that there's like a way to break through that and say, it's kind of like what you said before, like, shoot your shot? Like, is there something you can say, look, you just have to go for it?
It's hard. Everybody struggles with imposter syndrome. I honestly struggled with it until I came to Codecademy. So most of my career in life. And I think a lot of people are the same. And I think what you need to remember is that, yes, there's going to be people applying to a bunch of these jobs, but you know what you can do, right? And if everything that you put on your resume is clear, concise, and correct, and the company is interested in talking to you because of what they saw on your resume, that should be enough confidence to say, hey, I got a shot here, right? Like, if you apply somewhere and the company gets back to you and says they want to have a conversation, you've done enough to say, this person, without meeting them, just by looking at some words, could be a good fit to join our organization. So, and that I think is the hardest part, because getting across that line of, oh, I've applied and I'm waiting to hear back, actually hearing back, as far as I'm concerned, is the hardest part, because you need to articulate who you are and what you can do on a sheet of paper, obviously virtual, but like one page, right? To me, and the way that I would say it to people is like, that should be more challenging than actually going through the process. Because at that point, you're just talking about what you know, what you can do, what you have done. And that should be a piece of cake. If you can articulate that on one page, then you can say it to some folks that you would work with, I think. And it's easier said than done, you know?
Is this something about for a beginner applying for jobs for the first time? Do you ever look at a candidate and said, oh, they only have one project, I was looking for three? Oh, well, this project is not. I'm assuming that there is like some sort of quality to it, where if you see a project that is not a template that they build on themselves, or is there like some delineation on what kind of projects, like if you build one of these or two of these, like it's not about volume, it's the quality. How do you know as a beginner, okay, this should be enough? Because if you get a lot of rejections, you
Yeah.
get 30, 40 rejections from different companies,
Yeah.
you might start thinking there's something wrong with me. Maybe I need to go back to the
Right.
drawing board. I need to learn more. Maybe I just don't know enough. That's why they're not calling me back.
Yeah.
Is there like a cutoff of saying, look, if you can build, if you look at the job description and they ask him for these technologies. If you can build a project with those technologies, you should be good to go. Don't worry about it if it's one or three. Is there like a way of looking at it that you can know this should be enough?
As far as I'm concerned, if we're looking for specific tools and you say, hey, here's a project that I've worked on, or here's a product that I've built using those tools, that should be enough. Let's say there's 10 applicants and everyone has at least one project, some have two or three, then maybe those are the people that we reach out to first, right? And I've never done that. I can see that being the case because at the end of the day, we're trying to figure out who has the best experiences for this job, right? And until you read into it, like you could have only one project or one product that you've worked on. It could be exactly what we're working on here. So it's on us to actually read it through and to understand what you've worked on, because you could have worked on three things and they could not be great or they could not be relevant at all, right? But if you worked on one thing and it's super relevant and it's really high quality and it's still making some head waves wherever it is in the universe, then I think that's great. So I wouldn't look at someone and say, okay, they only have one project, so like get out of here. But it really is on, the talent function to say, hey, like you need to know what you're doing.
I mean, and to be fair, when you go through a boot camp, one of these 3 months boot camps, usually you have one capstone project.
Typically,
like they don't ask you to build 10. You do
right,
one that's very thorough, right?
Exactly.
That one that usually it's like, if you're doing like, for example, a full stack, if you're going as a full stack, it's a very thorough end-to-end sort of project where you showcase the entire scope of you worked on. So
exactly.
okay.
And those
I
are
think it makes
great.
sense.
Those are great because we know how intense those are. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. There's another question here about open source projects. How good do they look when applying? Is that something that recruiters look for? So I would imagine that goes in the same category of just things you've worked on. If you're an applicant and you say, okay, what can you build? Show me. Is open source one of those?
I wouldn't say that like we are specifically looking for or not for open source projects. I think you're right. I think it's about the same, right? Like you can show something that you've worked on open source, like it's totally fine. Most people don't actually like it won't be on their resume, but it will be like on their LinkedIn or somewhere else. Like if you've worked on something that has those skills and abilities that we need and it's somewhere out there, give me a way where I can find it.
Okay. I guess. Okay. Projects. That sounds fair to me.
Yeah.
Let's see any other questions. Okay, so last question here. It says, if you're not in a junior web development anymore. Okay, so I think this question goes about, so we've been talking about beginners a lot. So
yeah,
my understanding is that the shift goes, if you're more of a, if you have 1, 2, 3 years of experience under you and you're changing companies, I would imagine the shift changes from what you're showcasing in your resume and the kind of stuff that you're showcasing. Does your resume radically changes between being a beginner and maybe being like a junior, like intermediate 3 years?
Yeah, I think it does, right? I think when that happens, it's important to talk more about what you've actually been doing in your role than projects from
Okay.
previous. Or, for example, I don't know exactly when the cutoff is, but you don't necessarily need to list your education at the very top of your resume if you graduated 2 or 3 years ago, because I would rather see professional working experiences first. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, it makes total sense that when you're a professional, you want to showcase that professionals. I mean, I would imagine that there's still room for you to showcase kind of like personal work, but I would
Totally.
imagine that
Absolutely.
companies are mostly hiring you for what you've been learning at the role, professional role that you've been doing past.
Totally. Totally. But I also think like that personal work is important. I've hired an engineer before that. In their role, they were using the tools that we needed, but in their like personal work, they were working on something that was like similar in industry or similar in function. Like, still showcases it if it makes sense, if you're proud of it, and if it fits on the page, yeah, put it on there.
Awesome. Well, we've been talking for a while, 40 minutes, and we've done through some Q&A. So I think at this point, we're ready to wrap it up. Do you have any parting thoughts, anything else you want to share with the learners before we check out?
Just to stick with it. It's really challenging, and to apply for jobs, to go for your first job, it's the hardest one. They always say like foot in the door, right? Getting your foot in the door is the hardest thing that you can do. But make those connections, talk to people. People want to help. People want to see other people succeed, especially those that are just starting out. So hit us up. And not just like people within talent, but like other engineers that you're interested in, being in that role one day, right? Like, talk to them. Worst case scenario, they never get back to you, but some people will. I'm sure they will. I think I've done it. Certainly other people have done it. And some people get back and they're more than happy to impart some wisdom and, help out in any way. So just stick with it. Try not to be discouraged because it's really challenging, but you can do it. I know you can.
All right, that was Harlan from Recruiting at Codecademy. Thank you so much today for stopping by and sharing your knowledge with all of the learners at Codecademy. We're doing this every week, and next Monday we are going to have Madison Olson with us talking recruiting as well. So lots of knowledge, lots of sharing, tips, tricks, and things that you should consider when you're applying for your tech jobs, especially if you're a beginner. I know that it's very daunting, the process. So we hope that talks like this give you a bit more visibility, clear some thoughts, some doubts, and make you a bit more comfortable with what to expect and what's going to happen when you apply for this and how to be successful in it. Thank you, everybody, and have a good week.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for coming.
And we are not live.